Hi, and welcome to a special episode of Drafting Notes, the sister podcast of our main Page One podcast, where Tariq and I like to chat about one writing issue that's been vexing us, or perhaps people don't know as much about. And we've come to our new studio today
Very fancy
to film
indeed.
this one, which is in honor of your book launch, Tariq, The Midnight King. Here it is.
Look at
I've
that.
mentioned it on the podcast, and here it is now. And I thought we could use that as a sort of springboard to chat about what happens around the launch of a book, you know, the actual book launch itself, but also, you know, what do authors get involved in, what do they know, what don't they know, that sort of thing. So, I mean, first of all, how has the launch of The Midnight King been for you?
Oh, it's been great fun, yeah. So obviously we had the launch on the Thursday night, which Mark did a wonderful job interviewing. And it was and that part of it is really fun because you get everyone, all your pals are there and stuff, and you kind of have a big celebration. You go to the pub and stuff, and it's quite a nice big moment. But I suppose it's also quite localized like thing, isn't it? Like I remember chatting to the publisher, and their view was that because I had a conversation, I was like, is it better for a book launch to be in London, which is the kind of publishing scene where all the publishers are, or to have it up in Edinburgh where I know more people? And the view from the publisher was very much that book launches are for the author, they're not for the book. A book launch does not really do anything to kind of shift numbers or to get. So it's more to kind of celebrate the book launch, and so it's in a way it's quite nice. I suppose it means you can not worry about having to do anything or having to hit targets or do anything right to make a difference. It's just you can relax and have a bit of fun with it, and it's really good.
Yeah. And what do you actually know? Like, how did the book launch? I suppose one thing people might want to know is, how did the book launch itself come about? Is that something that the publishers organised?
So this is my first one, but from my perspective, the publisher, they got involved in speaking to bookshops, trying to find a venue for it, and so once a venue gets found, they kind of help. They put some drinks in the book launch part itself. They put some drinks down and stuff. So there was that kind of involvement from the publishers in that sense, but then a lot of it was also just me having to chat to the bookshop to kind of let them know of numbers and or the details, and then sharing it around and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it does feel very much like a kind of a nice way to kind of mark an occasion, I suppose. Yeah. But I think beyond that, I suppose the book launch itself is probably it doesn't do much to shift the needle, I think, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, although you do, I suppose. I mean, it was a sold-out event. We should say that.
Yeah. And I suppose it's publicity, and it's like and the bookshop will advertise it, and they'll put it in their social media feeds and put it out in the window and stuff. And also it means it guarantees that they'll have signed copies left over in to sell in the bookshop. So that's always good. So there's a whole bunch of like passive positive stuff around I suppose that you get from it for sure. Yeah.
So I mean, after 2 years or whatever, 18 months, 2 years of build up into this, the book comes out.
Yeah.
Launched on this day, you have as you say, essentially a nice party. Yeah. See your friends, see your family, and all that sort of stuff, and sell a few copies of the book. Yeah. But what happens then?
Well, I don't know. I'm still waiting to find out. Like it's funny. So I've had a couple of books out now, and the first few books were with Amazon, and this book's with Viper. And with Amazon seems to do it. My kind of experience with it was that Amazon did it very differently than the rest of the publishers, because Amazon, I suppose, controls a lot of the sales. Yeah. So a lot of the sales from an Amazon published book go through Amazon. So you get a lot of data. So you get all your data from Amazon. You get your sales figures updated, I think, on like an hourly or daily basis. Right, it's crazy. And you can drill into the numbers, like, you know, where about the world those books have been bought by, who's buying them, because it's all tied to someone's account, you know, who it is. You can look into the demographics of the sales, of what parts of the world, what time of day, you know, they give you everything. And on one hand, it's amazing having that, because it's super interesting being able to log in and see in real time almost how well it's doing and what part of the world it's doing well in. And then on the Kindle versions, you can see parts that they're highlighting, all that kind of stuff.
Okay,
so it's quite cool. You get a lot of data.
So you get that information.
You get all the information,
I better be careful what I highlight.
And that is great. But then I suppose the flip side is that you also become a bit of a slave to it. I think you end up like refreshing it and, you know, wondering why they're not going up as much as I hoped they would, or what you would expect to go, what other people have done, trying to compare yourself. So sometimes I guess maybe having all that information is not a great thing. But then the flip side is that with traditional publishers, it's very little. I think. I mean, I think I'm assuming I'll get like a sales update after a couple of weeks or so of how the initial kind of like bits done. And then I think it's quite periodical when you get your royalty statement.
Yes.
I think
So
how every
you just don't.
times a year.
It does strike me as that because we know a few writers obviously, and it does seem odd. It seems to me that there could be a better balance between, as you say, that the Amazon thing of knowing every
kind of
hour of
overload
what's
almost.
that which is too much information, and you can drive yourself mad with it, I think. But at the other end of the scale, only finding out when your royalties check comes in or something like that seems too extreme, and it is surprising even to me, who is on the fringes of the publishing world and stuff like that, that there is so little information given to the author about this. And of course, your sales are extremely important in terms of future book sales, like future publishing deals. So you would like to have more of a handle on that, I think, as an author.
I think that's right, and it's funny because folk will ask you, how's it going, and you can like, I don't actually know. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah. And I guess you can look at like book chart, like book seller,
that's true.
We'll have like a breakdown of 50 books or so, or 20 books. But unless you're in that high echelons, then you've no idea with it. And and you've on Amazon you've got like Kindle and book charts, and you can see where you rank in the overall bookstore. But again, that's just books that are sold on Amazon. That's not books that are sold in Waterson's or other high streets or independent bookstores and stuff. So to try and get that, and I guess that is the difficulty, collating all those figures. But the problem is, it's probably not the easiest thing to collate. I don't know how often that is collated. I don't know how it's collated, how often that's fed back to the publisher. So I don't actually know often how much information they have, how live that is, or if it's a lag. So it's, it is weird. I remember thinking that it's a very weird thing. Like, as you say, you spend all this time on this product, you put it out into the world, and you're not entirely sure how well it's doing. Whereas, like, you look at like a film, the film comes out and it's like daily box office.
The box office.
Weekend box office. It's so drilled into, like, instantly if it's going to be a flop
but
or not.
It is strange because, like, when it is such a vital piece of data for you as a writer, for your career, because it depends, you might have another deal for another book, but your overall sales are important to what a publisher in the future is going to be willing to take a risk with you.
Exactly.
And to not have access to that data as readily as you might want seems quite an outdated thing in today's world.
No, I probably agree with that. I think like it is, especially as you say, when a lot of it's tied into an offer 2 years down the line and stuff, and I think you're right in that there probably is a middle ground somewhere between having access to all the information and having access to just a bit more. And I'm sure there'll be folk who perhaps quite like not knowing, like who are quite happy. But then I suppose
it's like
having an opt-in
don't read your own
system,
reviews and all that sort of stuff.
But that's it. You also then spend your whole time on Goodreads and Amazon, like refreshing it to check all the reviews and the rating and stuff. So like, personally, I would like a bit more information, I think, than publishers tend to give out. But I don't even know what the reason behind that is. I don't know what information they have that they can share. I don't really know how it all works.
It is a very strange thing, isn't it? Because it's like you spend what, a year writing a book.
Yeah.
Hopefully sell it. You sell it. You wait 18 months to 2 years for it to come out, and it's like your whole focus for that time.
Yeah, and
then suddenly it comes out.
That unknown period.
It suddenly comes out, and then suddenly you have no control over it anymore, and you even don't know exactly what's happening with it.
I think that's like, is that not just like writing in a nutshell? Like,
it's true.
So much of it is accepting that you have no control over like so much of the process, and whether it's like whether someone picks it up or not, whether an agent picks it up or not, whether the cover is good, the title, the narrator, the voice, so much stuff you don't really have control over, and you you are kind of putting yourself in the hands of a publisher or whoever. Or I guess if you're self-pubbing yourself, it's maybe different because you that's when you do have the control, I suppose. You control over everything.
Yeah, that's true.
But otherwise, it's so much of the writing process is throwing yourself out there and wait to see what happens 6 months, a year down the line.
Is there, we've talked about on the main podcast the role of agents and stuff like that, and obviously what people think about with agents is sell the book. That's the primary, I guess, role of an agent. But they're also there to support the author in their career. But does the agent, will your agent get some information about the sales? Will they feed that back to you? When do they have routes that maybe you don't have?
I imagine that must be right. Like that would certainly be my first port of call when I ask a question. I'll probably go to my agent and say, "Do you have any idea how well it's doing?" To find out the numbers and stuff. And as opposed to going to the publisher myself, I probably would go through the agent. I suspect that's maybe the more usual route in type thing. And I'd like to think also they'd be interested in knowing how well it's doing, because I guess it's just more information that they could probably use.
They need you to make money, so they.
Well, that's
money.
it. But that's it. We've talked to people in the podcast before about agents and how the money should always flow one way towards the author, so the more success the author has, the more money the agent makes. So it's in their interest to make sure. It's in everyone's interest to make sure it sells well.
And going back to the idea of the book launch itself, I just wanted to touch on that before we wrap up, which is, I know you weren't. I joke on the podcast often about how terrible you are at promoting your own work, but and you weren't looking forward to it in many ways.
Yeah.
Was it as bad as you thought it would be?
Much worse. It was awful. No, as you say, we've chatted to others on the podcast before, and everyone, the consensus always tends to be like an author sits in their room and spends all this time, a year plus sometimes, by themselves in their head, and then suddenly it goes on. You kind of put yourself out on the world, and that, I think the book launch stuff like that, and I guess festival panels and things are the kind of time when you're in the spotlight the most as an author, and it's funny though, because I was saying to you on the night that I've done panels before at festivals, and you've got 50, 100 people, whatever, in the audience, but they're strangers.
Yeah.
And I don't feel nervous at all doing that, because it kind of, not because it means nothing, but I don't know them. There's
not an association.
No association, exactly. Whereas I was way more nervous on the night because it was people that it was like 50 odd people that I knew mainly. It was like pals and family and stuff. And I was way more nervous for that. I suppose because I've never done anything like this in front of them before. So I guess you are really showing people you know.
Yeah, that's right. Putting yourself out there as a writer you're showing your vulnerabilities or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, but to do that, that's always worse if it's people you know.
I think that's right. And it's not also a part of it that's like, there's that kind of part of my brain that continually goes like, this is such a wanker. It's such a wanky thing to do. Like people are like, who's this guy?
My brain does that.
Who's this guy? Who's this guy think he is? Like fucking talking like he's like that kind of. I guess that kind of imposter syndrome.
That's imposter syndrome.
Like you're talking about stuff, like you have any kind of authority on a subject at all, and I think you just have to get past that.
I think you do. It is. I know exactly what you mean. I feel that from the point of view of who's this? What? When I go and do a book panel and I've got best-selling authors beside me, they must be thinking. I always think, who is this guy? Why is he asking me questions?
But it's, as you see, it's not true at all, is it? Because because I think the more you do panels and stuff like that, you realise actually you're all just you're all folk on a stage, and you're all just
exactly.
You're all just there doing a job and stuff. And if you're doing a panel with people and you're interviewing them on stage at a festival, then you are as much right to be there and as much of an expert in that moment as anyone else in this.
Yeah,
I think they just have to accept it.
I think that's right. And I suppose I would wrap this up by asking, would you, having done it now, having not been sure about it, but would you want to do another launch for your next book or in the future?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is. I think ultimately.
I think the way your publisher put it as a celebration of the author for you. Not of the book necessarily, but for you.
Yeah,
then it's
I think that's exactly the way I look at it as well. It's a celebration of a moment in time, like an accomplishment. You've done something. It's taken a year. Blah 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 blah. It's gone to the marketing and it's out now. And it is nice just to mark that somehow. And and even if it's just like a relaxed chat with your pals in a room and then going to a pub afterwards. Yeah, it's quite nice. It's a nice catch up with folk, and especially you know, when you get older, you got kids, you don't even see the little them anymore, so it's quite nice to have a reason to go and see people.
Exactly. Well, you know, I never need an excuse to attend a party, so I certainly hope you have another one in the future. But yeah, I hope that's been insightful in some way to those that don't know about book launches. You know, I would often go into a bookshop, you see these book launches and stuff.
Well, it's good. Sorry, interrupt you.
No.
Well, so have you gone to other book launches of people that you don't know? Like, have you gone to like a?
Yeah, I have, and less so. I would say. I say I've gone to more book launches of people that I do know than I don't, but I have been to a couple. But you kind of, I don't know. I guess it is from that point of view. You kind of put it on a pedestal, which is maybe where on the other side you get the imposter syndrome from.
Yeah.
But like you say, it's just a chat about an accomplishment that you've done that everyone there wants to hear about.
Yeah,
Everyone
and
wants to
that's the way look at
celebrate it as
exactly,
well.
yeah,
So
yeah. Would you do a similar setup for your book when your book does come out in the future?
I'll be doing like it'll be like I'm hiring out a palace in Venice.
Incredible. Right, I'm there.
You know, laser
Brilliant.
shows,
Brilliant.
fireworks, all that sort of stuff. Full mast ball.
Nice.
So yeah, that you can look forward to that one. Yeah,
from
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise style. Tom Cruise can interview you.
Tom Cruise is going to do it. Yeah.
Interview while skydiving.
Yeah.
I like it.
Excellent. So yeah, so you can look forward to that. We'll get that on page one when that happens. But in the meantime, hope you enjoyed this episode of Drafting Notes, which we do these every week. These are timed exclusives for our Patreon backers, so you get access to these episodes a few months in advance before they're released to the public on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can always catch us on the main podcast, Page One, the Writers Podcast as well, where we speak to brilliant guests every week.
That's right.
But in the meantime, have a good week, and we'll speak to you next time.
See you later.